Hey everyone, if you're new here, I'm glad you're clicking on this. If you've been here before, welcome back. This is a story about boundaries, about what it means to have something that's truly yours, and the quiet, earth-shattering moment you realize your family doesn't see you as an adult. It's a long one, and it gets heavy, so maybe settle in. If these kinds of real-life stories resonate with you, consider liking and subscribing. It genuinely helps. Okay, let's get into it. The sound that changed everything wasn't a scream or a crash or even a raised voice. It was the gentle, unmistakable scritch-scratch of a key trying and failing to turn in a deadbolt. I was in what I called the sunroom, though at that moment it was just a dusty rectangle of afternoon light cutting across the floorboards I'd painstakingly refinished myself. I was packing the last of my books into a cardboard box, the air thick with the smell of old paper and fresh pine from the moving blankets. My phone was on the floor, playing some ambient playlist. The house was empty, echoey. It already didn't feel like mine anymore. Then, the sound. Front door, scritch, scratch, jiggle. My heart didn't even pound. It just sank, a cold, heavy stone dropping into the pit of my stomach. I knew that jiggle. I'd done it 1,000 times with the old sticky key before I'd changed all the locks. I knew who it was, or at least, I knew who it had to be. I stood up, my knees popping, and walked slowly through the empty living room. The blinds were open. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could see two blurred shapes, one taller, one shorter, my parents. And I could just make out the shape of my sister's hand, the one with the chipped blue nail polish she always had, holding a key. My key, or what she thought was my key. She was trying it again, a little more forcefully now. I heard my dad's muffled voice. "Try the other one, sweetie." He said it was the silver one. I didn't move to open the door. I just watched, this surreal feeling of detachment washing over me. This was it. The moment I had been dreading and, in a strange way, waiting for. I leaned my forehead against the cool wall beside the doorframe and closed my eyes for a second. I could hear my own breath, steady but shallow. I could hear the muffled, confused conversation outside. "It's not working, Dad." "Let me try. Maybe it's just stiff." More jiggling, then a knock. Polite at first. Tap, 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 then louder. Bang, bang, bang. "Daniel, you home? It's Mom and Dad." I took a deep breath, the kind that's supposed to ground you, but it just filled my lungs with the dust of my own departure. I reached for the knob, my hand hovering for a second. This was the threshold. On one side, the life they thought I was living. On the other, the life I had actually built and was now quietly dismantling. I turned the lock. The click was deafening in the quiet hall. I pulled the door open. The afternoon light flooded in, framing them on my porch step. My mom, with her hopeful, slightly worried smile already forming. My dad, looking past me into the empty house, his brow furrowed. And my sister, Chloe, standing between them, a set of shiny new keys dangling from her finger, a mix of excitement and irritation on her face. She held up the keys as if presenting evidence. "Your locks are messed up, Danny," she said, rolling her eyes. "We've been standing out here forever. I told Mom you probably wouldn't be home, but she insisted we surprise you." She stepped forward, making to move past me into the house. That's when I spoke, my voice quieter than I intended, but clear. "The locks aren't messed up, Chloe." I paused, looking from her confused face to my parents. "They're not your keys." My dad's frown deepened. "What do you mean? We had them copied from the set you gave us for emergencies. Just last month." I met his gaze, that familiar heavy feeling of justification and guilt warring in my chest. This was the moment, the turning point. All the quiet decisions, the secret plans, the nights of anxious planning had led to this single, impossible sentence on my front porch. "I know," I said, my voice finally finding its strength, "but you shouldn't have done that. You gave her keys to a house that isn't mine anymore." I swallowed. "I sold it. The closing was 2 weeks ago." The silence that followed wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical thing. My mom's smile didn't fade. It just froze, rigid and confused. My sister's hand slowly lowered, the keys clinking softly against her leg. My dad's eyes narrowed, scanning my face, then darting past me into the barren living room, finally seeing it, not as a lived-in space, but as an empty shell. You what? My mother finally whispered, and right then, with the three of them standing on the porch of a house that was no longer mine, I realized this story didn't start with a key failing to turn. It started a long, long time ago. In the house I grew up in, to understand the earthquake on the porch, you have to understand the ground it was built on. I grew up in a nice suburban house that always felt a little too small for the personalities in it. Not physically, but emotionally. I was the older brother, Daniel, the responsible one. Chloe, 2 years younger, was the free spirit. That's the polite family lexicon. The translation, as I lived it, was that I was the placid lake, expected to be calm and accommodating, and Chloe was the wildfire, unpredictable, dazzling, and everyone's job was to make sure she didn't burn herself down, even if it meant the lake got drained in the process. It was in the small things, 1,000 tiny paper cuts that shaped my understanding of my place. If Chloe wanted the last piece of cake, she'd throw a dramatic, tearful fit about having a bad day at school. I'd be told, "Daniel, be the bigger person. Let your sister have it. You know how she gets." If I had a soccer game and Chloe had a drama club rehearsal at the same time, guess which event the whole family attended? I'd scan the stands from the field, seeing my friends' families clustered together, and feel a hollow sort of understanding. Chloe's performances were a production. My games were just games. The biggest battleground, though, was space. Personal space. The concept seemed to apply only to Chloe. Her room was a sacred, chaotic temple. No one was allowed in without permission, and woe betide anyone who moved a single glitter-covered notebook. My room, however, was treated as a communal annex. "Daniel, Chloe's friends are coming over. They're going to hang out in your room, okay? Yours is bigger." It wasn't a question. My model airplanes, my books, my carefully arranged things, they were all movable, dispensable, in service of Chloe's social life. I remember one specific afternoon. I was 16, buried in physics homework that was making my brain ache. Chloe, 14, had a meltdown because she wanted to practice a TikTok dance with her friend in the living room. But the light was all wrong. My dad, looking weary, had come into my room without knocking. "Danny, can you work at the kitchen table for a bit? Your sister needs the living room." I'd mustered a rare protest. "Dad, I'm right in the middle of this. It's really loud in the kitchen. Why can't she use her room?" His face had taken on that familiar, patient explanatory tone he used when my logic was inconvenient. "Her room's too small for the two of them to move around. Come on, be a team player. It's just for an hour." It was never just for an hour. I'd gathered my books, my pencil case, my calculator, this heavy knot of resentment in my throat. As I passed the living room, Chloe and her friend were already moving the coffee table, giggling. She didn't even look at me. It was her right. This was the natural order. My parents weren't monsters. They loved me. I never doubted that. They came to my graduation beaming with pride. They'd pat me on the back and say, "We never have to worry about you, Daniel. You've got such a good head on your shoulders." That was the core of it, I think. They didn't worry about me, so they didn't see me. My needs were quiet, so they assumed they weren't urgent. My disappointments were swallowed, so they assumed they didn't exist. I was the reliable, low-maintenance son. My job was to be stable, so Chloe could be spectacular. The message was internalized, deeply and completely. My space, my time, my peace was negotiable. Hers was not. My achievements were expected. Hers were celebrated. My boundaries were flexible. Hers were concrete. This dynamic created a weird, silent distance between Chloe and me. We weren't enemies. We just existed in different family galaxies, orbiting the same sun but with vastly different gravitational pulls. We had moments, sure, watching stupid movies late at night when our parents were asleep. But they were fragile, easily shattered by the next family decree that her needs superseded mine. I learned to build my own world internally, in my head, and later in the spaces I could physically control, which, for a long time, were nowhere. The yearning for a place that was truly, irrevocably mine started in that house, a place where the locks worked for me, and only me, where I could say no, and that was the end of the discussion. It was a quiet, persistent dream, a secret blueprint I drew and redrew in my mind while I smiled and handed over the last piece of cake and cleared out of my own room. Moving out was my first act of defiance, though I framed it as practicality. I got a decent job straight out of community college in IT support. It wasn't a passion, but it was stable. It paid. The goal was singular: rent an apartment, my own space. The day I signed the lease for a one-bedroom walk-up 40 minutes from my parents' house, I felt a jittery, terrifying high. I bought a cheap, ugly couch from a thrift store and a new deadbolt for the door. The first night I slept there, alone, in the silence. It was the most profound peace I'd ever known. No one could give my space away. No one could tell me to move. It lasted about 6 weeks. It started innocuously. "Oh, Danny, Chloe's thinking of community college too, but she's so overwhelmed by the application process. You're so good at that boring paperwork stuff. Can she come over and you can help her? Your place is so calm, it'll be good for her." So my apartment became a satellite counseling office. Then it was, "Honey, you know how your sister's job is closer to your side of town now? The bus route is terrible. It would be such a huge help if she could just crash on your couch 2 nights a week until she figures out a car." The couch in my sanctuary became her designated bed. I'd come home from work on Tuesdays and Thursdays to find her bags by the door, her makeup on my bathroom counter, the TV on my Netflix account. I'd try to set limits. "Mom, it's really not convenient this week. I've got a big project." "It's just 2 nights, Daniel. Be supportive. She's your sister." The guilt was a powerful weapon, and they wielded it with unconscious expertise. Saying no made me the villain, the unsupportive, selfish brother. So I'd cave. I'd seethe silently as I washed her dishes, as I found my food eaten, as I tiptoed around my own living room while she slept on my couch. The apartment never truly felt like mine. It felt like a temporary way station that my family had a map to. They had keys, of course. "For emergencies," my mom said, pressing them into my dad's hand as I moved. The emergencies were always Chloe-related. She'd forgotten a textbook. She needed to borrow a black shirt for a last-minute audition. She'd had a fight with a friend and needed a place to cool off. I started working insane overtime, partly to afford a better place, a fortress, but mostly just to not be home. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot after work, dreading going upstairs, wondering if I'd find her there. My sanctuary had been breached. The blueprint in my mind got more detailed. It wasn't just an apartment anymore. It was a house with a mortgage, with deeds, with legal paperwork. Something solid they couldn't casually walk into. It took 5 years of relentless saving. 5 years of eating cheap food, wearing old clothes, saying no to vacations with friends. Every extra dollar went into the house fund. It was my secret mission. My parents knew I was saving, but they assumed it was for a nicer car or maybe a future wedding. They'd joke, "Our careful Daniel, always planning ahead." They had no idea how far ahead I was planning. I'd scout neighborhoods on weekends. I taught myself about interest rates, property taxes, closing costs. This wasn't just a purchase, it was an emancipation proclamation. The day my offer was accepted on a small, tired-looking bungalow with good bones, I cried in my realtor's car. Not tears of joy, but of utter, profound relief. It was the most adult thing I'd ever done. It was also the beginning of the biggest secret I'd ever kept. I moved in with my ugly thrift store couch and a mattress on the floor. I didn't tell my family for a month. I just existed there. I painted the walls a dark midnight blue they would have hated. I left dishes in the sink for 2 days because I could. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, feeling the solidity of it. Mine. The deed said so. The bank said so. When I finally invited them over, their reaction was a cocktail of surprise, mild concern about the fixer-upper aspects, and then, swiftly, assimilation. My mom immediately started talking about how Chloe would love the spare bedroom for when she visited. My dad examined the lock on the back door and said, "We should get a copy of this key, just in case." The old script, playing in a new venue. The house was just another room to be commandeered. They didn't see the culmination of a 5-year struggle. They saw a new, slightly inconvenient location for the same family play. That visit was the moment the secret plan evolved. I knew then that owning the house wasn't enough. I had to own the narrative of my own life. I just didn't know how explosive that ownership would turn out to be. The bungalow was my project, my therapy. I learned to patch drywall, to refinish floors, to grout tile. With every swing of a hammer, I felt like I was building not just a house, but a person, the person I wanted to be. Self-sufficient, firm, whole. For 2 years, it worked. The visits from my family were manageable, though the assumptions always lurked beneath the surface. Chloe's temporary stays became a predictable quarterly event, usually after a breakup or a job disappointment. I'd come home from work to find her curled on my couch, my fridge raided, and my parents would call later. "Thanks for being there for her, Danny. You're such a rock." The rock was starting to develop fractures of deep, silent resentment. The turning point came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I'd just finished retiling the bathroom shower and was aching all over, but in that good, productive way. My phone rang. It was my mom, her voice bright and chatty. "Hi, sweetie, how's the house coming?" "Good, Mom. Just finished the bathroom." "That's wonderful. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. You know, Chloe's been having a really hard time since the whole thing with that roommate fell through." A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I knew this preamble. "She's been looking for a new place, but everything is so expensive. And with her new job being so uncertain, your father and I were thinking." She took a breath, the one she used before presenting a fait accompli as a suggestion. "Your house has that lovely spare room just sitting there. It would be such a perfect temporary solution for her. Just for a few months until she gets back on her feet. She could pay you a little rent. It would be good for her to have her brother's stability around." The silence on my end was volcanic. I stared out the window of the house I had built with my own hands, my sanctuary, and saw it transforming before my eyes. I saw my bathroom counter covered in her products. I heard her music through the walls. I felt the erosion of my hard-won peace, day by day, until a few months became indefinite. The old script was reaching its climax, Daniel's space once again being drafted into service for Chloe. "Mom," I said, my voice strangely calm. "No." A beat of stunned silence. "What?" I said, "No. Chloe can't live here." "Daniel, don't be selfish. This is your sister. She's in a bind. We'd help her ourselves, but you know our place is too far from her work. This is the perfect—" "It's not perfect. It's my house. I don't want a roommate, not even a temporary one." Her tone shifted from persuasive to wounded. "I can't believe you'd be so cold, after everything we've done for you. Family helps family, Daniel." That phrase. Family helps family. It had been the tagline of my entire life. It always meant I helped them. It never seemed to flow the other way. "I have helped," I said, the heat rising in my voice now. "Repeatedly. My entire life. This isn't about helping. This is about you deciding what happens in my home without asking me. The answer is no." The conversation devolved. There were tears, hers, accusations of me changing, of me being influenced by individualistic nonsense, and finally, a tense, brittle goodbye. An hour later, my dad called, the reasonable one, the negotiator. "Son, your mother's upset. Let's talk about this logically. What are your specific concerns? We can set ground rules, a firm move-out date." But I was done negotiating. For the first time, I saw the entire pattern laid out like a map. This would never stop. As long as I owned this house, it would be seen as a family asset, a safety net for Chloe. My boundaries were just obstacles to be reasoned with, wept over, or guilt-tripped into removal. That night, lying awake in the dark, the idea came to me. It was radical, terrifying, and crystal clear. It wasn't enough to just say no. I had to remove the chessboard entirely. I got up, went to my laptop, and opened a real estate website. I looked at the estimated value of my bungalow. The market was hot. I'd done a lot of work. The number was significantly higher than what I'd paid. A wild, untethered feeling rose in my chest. What if I sold it? It wasn't about the money. It was about control. It was about performing an act so definitive, so adult, that they could no longer pretend my life was a committee decision. If I didn't own the house, They couldn't give away its rooms. It was the ultimate boundary. The next morning, I called my realtor. I told her I wanted to list it quietly and to fast-track the process. I told no one. Not my friends, not my coworkers, certainly not my family. I lived in a state of surreal double life for the next 8 weeks, staging the house for viewings when I was supposed to be at work, signing disclosures, negotiating with buyers, all while taking my parents' calls, nodding along as my mom, still frosty, talked about maybe helping Chloe find a studio apartment since you're unwilling to help. The guilt was a constant companion, but it was quieter now, drowned out by the drumbeat of a terrifying freedom. The closing date was set. I found a new place, a modern, secure apartment building downtown with a front desk and key fob access. No spare room, no lovely space for Chloe. I signed that lease the same day I sold the house. For 2 weeks after closing, I was a ghost in the bungalow, packing my life into boxes. The new owners were gracious, letting me rent back for a short period. I was in this liminal space, physically in the house but legally severed from it. It was during these 2 weeks that my parents, in a stunning act of tragic timing, decided to broker peace by giving Chloe the ultimate gift: independent access to her brother's stable home. They had a key copied from the set I'd given them years ago for the apartment, the key that had never fit the new locks on the bungalow, the key that was now a useless piece of metal to a door I no longer owned. They were planning their surprise visit, their grand gesture of normalcy, while I was erasing the very ground they were trying to stand on. The collision was inevitable. And it happened on a sunny afternoon, with the sound of a key that didn't work. The silence on the porch stretched, thick and disbelieving. My mother's hand had flown to her mouth. My father's face cycled through confusion, dawning comprehension, and then a deep purpling anger. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice a sharp, incredulous shatter of the quiet. "You sold it? You sold the house without telling anyone?" "Yes," I said, the simplicity of the word feeling powerful. "But why?" my mother whispered, her eyes wide and glistening. "We loved this house. You put so much work into it." "That's exactly why, Mom," I said, leaning against the doorframe, feeling the solid wood. For the last time. It was my work, my house, and everyone kept trying to give parts of it away. My dad found his voice, low and dangerous. "So this is a tantrum, because we asked you to help your sister." "It's not a tantrum, Dad. It's a decision, an adult decision about my own property." "Adult?" he scoffed, stepping forward, peering past me into the emptiness. "Adults communicate with their families. They don't sneak around and sell homes out from under everyone." "Who is everyone?" I asked, and I heard a new steel in my own voice. "Who else owned this house? Whose name was on the deed? It was mine. Only mine. I didn't sell it out from under anyone but myself." Chloe shook her head, her arms crossed tightly. "You are so unbelievably selfish. You knew I was looking for a place. Mom and Dad said you were just being difficult about me staying for a bit, but this is pathological." Her words were meant to wound, and they did, but in a distant way. I was watching the scene from outside myself. "This isn't about you, Chloe," I said, though we all knew that was only half true. "This is about me. For once, this is entirely about what I need." "What you need," my dad exploded. "What you need is to remember you're part of a family. You don't get to make unilateral decisions that affect everyone like this." "How does me selling my house affect you?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. "Are you homeless? Did you pay the mortgage? How does this change your life other than you can't plan my space for me anymore?" My mother started to cry, soft, wounded tears. "Why would you keep such a huge secret? Why wouldn't you talk to us? We're your parents, Daniel. We deserve a conversation." That word, deserve, it hung in the air. "Did I deserve a conversation when you decided Chloe should live here?" I asked quietly. "You didn't ask. You told. You presented it as a done deal. That's the language this family speaks. I just finally started speaking it back." The argument spilled off the porch. They followed me inside as I retreated, their shock giving way to a torrent of accusations and hurt. We stood in the barren living room, our voices bouncing off the naked walls. "Where are you even going?" Chloe demanded. "I found an apartment downtown." "An apartment? After you had a house?" Her disdain was palpable. It was a step down in her eyes, in their eyes, a regression. "It's what I want," I said, packing a box with deliberate slowness. "This is because of me, isn't it?" she said, her voice trembling now with self-righteous hurt. "You're punishing me because my life is messy and yours is so perfect." I stopped, putting a book down carefully. "Chloe, for the last time, this is not about you. It's about me. My entire life, every choice, every room, every last piece of cake has been viewed through the lens of how it relates to you. I am done. I'm making a choice that exists outside of your orbit. For me." My dad was pacing. "You've lost your mind. The market is insane. You'll never get back in. You threw away equity, stability. For what? A principle?" "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "For the principle that my home is mine, not the family's emergency backup plan. That principle is worth more to me than equity." The conversation spiraled in circles for an hour. They veered from anger to pleading to more anger. They demanded my new address. I refused. "You'll get it when I'm settled," I said, which sent my mother into a fresh wave of tears. "You don't trust us?" she wept. "It's not about trust," I said, exhausted. "It's about privacy, a concept I am apparently only now allowed to have." The climax came when my dad, in a final desperate bid for control, said, "Well, we're not just going to leave. We're your family. We're going to help you pack. We're going to see this through." That was the trigger, the final overstep. "No," I said, my voice flat and final. "You are going to leave. Now." "Daniel James, you do not tell your parents to leave." "I do," I said, walking to the front door and holding it open. The late afternoon sun poured in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air between us. "This is still my rented space until tomorrow, and I'm asking you to leave. This isn't a family meeting. This is me setting a boundary. If you don't respect it, you are showing me exactly why I had to do all of this in secret." The use of my full name, met with such cold defiance, stunned them into a new kind of silence. My father looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a recognition. He was seeing me, truly seeing me, not as his malleable son, but as a separate, stubborn, autonomous man. And he didn't like what he saw. Without another word, he took my mother's elbow. She resisted for a moment, looking at me with heartbroken eyes, but he guided her firmly toward the door. Chloe shot me a look of pure, undiluted hatred before flouncing out after them. They descended the porch steps, a defeated little parade. I watched them get into their car. My dad sat in the driver's seat for a long time, not starting the engine. I could see them talking, arguing. My mother was crying again. I closed the door. The lock clicked, a sound that now held a different, hollow meaning. I slid down to sit on the floor, my back against the door, in the exact spot where, just hours before, I'd felt such peace. Now, I was shaking. Adrenaline and grief and a terrifying, giddy freedom warred inside me. I had done it. I had drawn the line. And they had, for the first time in my life, been forced to step back from it. The house was silent, but it was a different silence than before. It was the silence after a storm has passed, where the damage is still being assessed, and you're not sure if what's left is ruins or a clean slate. The next 36 hours were a numb, mechanical blur. I finished packing. The movers came and took everything to my new apartment, a sleek, anonymous box on the 12th floor. I did a final walkthrough of the bungalow, my footsteps echoing. I touched the kitchen counter I'd installed, the bedroom window that caught the morning light. I felt a deep, aching loss, but it was clean. It was my choice. I handed the keys to the new owner, a young couple with a baby on the way, their faces full of the same hopeful excitement I'd once had. I felt like a ghost passing the torch. Then, I turned off my phone. I knew the barrage that was coming. The calls, the texts, the voicemails swinging between rage and heartbreak and manipulative concern. I couldn't face it. Not yet. I needed to be in my new space, to breathe its new air, to prove to myself that I had done the right thing before I let their voices back in. For 2 days, I unboxed. I arranged my books on new shelves. I made my bed. I stood at my floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city skyline, a view that belonged to no one's memory but mine. The silence here was different, not the deep quiet of the house, but a white noise hum of urban life, impersonal and freeing. No one knew I was here. It was the most alone I'd ever been, and for those first 48 hours, it felt like salvation. On the evening of the second day, powered by a fragile new strength, I turned my phone back on. It exploded. Dozens of missed calls, a waterfall of text messages. I didn't read them. I called my parents' landline, the most neutral ground I could think of. My dad answered on the first ring. Daniel. His voice was cold, formal. I'm settled, I said, bypassing any greeting. I'm calling to let you know I'm okay. Your mother is not okay, he said bluntly. She hasn't eaten since we left. She thinks she's failed as a parent, that we drove you away with our smothering. He said the word as if it were a foreign, ridiculous concept. A lump formed in my throat. This isn't about failure, Dad. Then what is it about? Spell it out for me, because I genuinely don't understand. We raised you. We supported you. We loved you. And your response is to cut us out of a major life event, to treat us like intruders. I took a breath, looking out at the blinking city lights. You were intruders, Dad. Not because you came to visit, but because you brought a key you shouldn't have had to a house that wasn't yours, to give access I didn't agree to. That's the whole story, right there. We were trying to help your sister. And I said slowly, was trying to help myself. For once. And you see that as a betrayal. That's the problem. There was a long silence. I could hear my mother saying something faint in the background. She wants to talk to you, he said, his voice gruff. He handed over the phone. Daniel? Her voice was thin, ravaged by tears. Please, baby. Please just come over for dinner. We can talk about this like a family. We're so sorry if we overstepped. We love you both so much. We just want to help. The old pull was there, magnetic and powerful. The desire to soothe her, to make it better, to return to the known rhythm, even if it chafed. But I thought of the key in Chloe's hand, the entitlement, the decades of assuming. Mom, I can't come for dinner, I said, my own voice thick. Not yet. I need some time, space, real space, not the kind you give me and then take back when Chloe needs something. How long? She whispered. I don't know. Are you ever going to give us your new address? Yes, I said. When I'm ready. And on the condition that you never, ever make a copy of the key, that you never give it to Chloe without my explicit permission, that you call before you visit, every time. The conditions hung in the air, a stark list of demands that, to any other family, would be basic respect. To mine, they were a revolution. She cried softly. You're treating us like strangers. I'm treating you the way I needed to be treated all along, I said, like adults who respect another adult's boundaries. The conversation ended with more tears, more unresolved pain. I hung up feeling drained but not defeated. I had stated my terms. The ball was in their court. The next morning, the fallout reached its peak. A text from Chloe, long and scathing. It accused me of trying to break up the family, of being jealous of her, of needing therapy. The final line was the killer. I showed the texts to Mom and Dad. They agree you're being cruel and unstable. Maybe you should be alone since that's clearly what you want. Don't contact us until you're ready to apologize. It was an ultimatum. A classic family maneuver. Isolate the rebel, demand surrender. For a moment, the old fear gripped me, the fear of being cast out, of being the bad one. I stared at the message, my hands cold. Then, I looked around my new apartment, at my books on my shelves, at my view, at the silence that was mine to break. I didn't reply. I simply blocked her number. Not out of malice, but out of survival. The breaking incident wasn't the sale of the house. It was this. The realization that maintaining my peace might cost me my family's approval, possibly even my place in the family itself. And for the first time, I was willing to pay that price. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. I had won my freedom, but it tasted like ash and isolation. The silence from my family was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with accusation. I'd go to work, come home, cook a meal for one, and sit with the weight of what I'd done. Guilt was my constant companion. Had I been too harsh? Was I, as Chloe said, just jealous and pathologically selfish? Had I destroyed my family over a spare bedroom? I replayed the porch scene 1,000 times in my head. The shock on their faces, my mother's tears, the jiggle of the useless key. I questioned my own motives. Had I really needed to go nuclear? Couldn't I have just changed the locks and said no again and again? But deep down, I knew. Saying no had never worked. It had always been the opening bid in a negotiation where I was expected to compromise myself away. The sale of the house wasn't just a practical solution. It was a symbol, a brutal, undeniable symbol that I was the author of my own life. They couldn't negotiate with a sold house. They couldn't guilt-trip a deed that was in someone else's name. I started seeing a therapist. I needed a neutral voice, someone to help me untangle the dense knot of duty, love, and resentment. In her office, I said things out loud I'd never dared to think. I think I hate my sister. I resent my parents' love for me because it feels conditional on my compliance. I feel like a monster for wanting something that is just mine. She listened. She reframed. It sounds like you weren't selling a house, she said one session. You were constructing a boundary so large, so physical, that it couldn't be ignored or walked over. That's not pathological. That's the action of someone who has run out of smaller, quieter ways to say, I exist separately from you. Her words were a balm. They didn't take the pain away, but they gave it meaning. I wasn't a villain. I was a person who had reached his limit. I allowed myself to grieve. I grieved for the family I thought I had, the one where my needs were automatically considered. I grieved for the lost closeness with my parents, even if that closeness had often felt suffocating. I even grieved for the bungalow, the dream I had to destroy to save myself. Slowly, tentatively, I began to build a new life in the apartment. I invited a coworker over for a football game. I joined a book club at the local library. I went on a few awkward dates. Each act felt like a rebellion, a reclamation. See, I can have a life I built. A month after the porch incident, a letter arrived in my mailbox at work. My father's precise engineering handwriting. My heart hammered as I opened it. It was not an apology. It was not an invitation. It was a stark, emotional accounting. Daniel, it began. Your mother's seeing a counselor. She is struggling to understand what happened. I am struggling too. I've replayed our conversations, my own actions for weeks. I'm trying to see it from your perspective. It is difficult. I keep coming back to the key. You are right. We should not have made a copy for your sister without asking you. At the time, it seemed a harmless, helpful gesture. A way to give her some independence and give you a break from being the point of contact. We did not see it as an invasion. We see now that you did. That is a failure of imagination on our part. You spoke of a pattern. I've been thinking about that word. A pattern implies repetition. I'm forced to examine other instances, and I'm uncomfortable with what I find. Perhaps we have, as you say, viewed your stability as a family resource. That was not our intention. Our intention was love, but I'm beginning to understand that impact matters more than intention. I am not writing to demand reconciliation. I am writing to tell you that I am thinking, that I am trying. I cannot speak for your mother or sister. But for myself, I want you to know, I see you. Perhaps for the first time, I am trying to see you as you are, not as my son who needs no worry, but as a man who has his own worries, his own needs, his own borders. The door here is open. On your terms. When you are ready. Dad, I read it 5 times. Then I cried, great heaving sobs I hadn't allowed myself since I was a child. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was recognition. It was a crack in the fortress of their certainty. It was the first step. And it was enough for now to let me breathe. It's been 8 months now. The landscape of my family is forever altered. We are not the same, and we may never be. And I'm starting to believe that's okay, maybe even necessary. My relationship with my parents is in a slow, careful rebuild. We have dinner once a month, at a restaurant, neutral ground. The conversations are stilted at times, avoiding landmines. They have visited my apartment exactly twice, both times with a phone call 2 days in advance. They have not asked for a key. My mother still looks at me sometimes with a sadness that makes my chest hurt, but there's a new wariness there too, a respect for the lines I've drawn. My father and I talk more about sports, about his work, about things that don't cut so close to the bone. It's a quieter, more distant love, but in some ways, it feels more real. It's love for who I am, not for what I provide. Chloe and I are not in contact. The ultimatum she issued still stands on her end. I heard through my parents that she moved in with a friend, that she's doing okay. I miss the sister I had in those fleeting, quiet moments, but I don't miss the dynamic. I had to choose between a relationship with her on the old, painful terms or peace. I chose peace. It is a choice I mourn, but do not regret. The apartment feels like home. It is mine in a way the house, for all my sweat and tears, never fully did. Because its ownership isn't just legal, it's psychological. No one has a claim to it. No one assumes its space is communal. It is my sanctuary, finally, truly. This whole experience taught me a brutal, beautiful lesson. Sometimes, to build the life you need, you have to be willing to demolish the life you have, even if others are living comfortably in it. Setting boundaries isn't a single no. It's a series of actions that enforce that no, actions that can feel like violence to a system that depends on your compliance. I'm not the easy son anymore. I'm probably labeled the difficult one, the selfish one, and I'm learning to be okay with that. The cost of being seen as good by my family was the erasure of my own needs. The cost of being seen as difficult is my own peace, my own autonomy. I'll pay the second cost every time. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in this story, the reliable one, the peacemaker, the one whose space and time and energy is always being quietly drafted into someone else's service, I want to tell you this. Your needs are not negotiable. Your space is not communal property. You are allowed to build a room of your own and put a lock on the door that only you hold the key to. It might cause an earthquake. People might be shocked and angry and hurt, but on the other side of that quake is solid ground. Your ground. The key my sister held on my porch was a symbol of everything I'd never been allowed to have, a private, inviolate self. By selling the house, I didn't just take away a key. I took back the right to my own locks, and that, in the end, was the only thing I ever really wanted. So I'll leave you with this question, something I'm still figuring out myself. When does helping your family cross the line into harming yourself? And how do you know when it's time to rebuild the walls, even if it breaks some hearts along the way? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening to my story.